Hello, you are watching MMA Crypt Fighting Talk. We had some major stories break this week to start 2014. As World Series of Fighting laid down a crossover challenge to Bellator. Tito Ortiz gets arrested for DUI, and Dominick Cruz gets stripped of his bantamweight title. Joining me to discuss these topics will be Greg Marshall and Chris McMillan. Okay, let's get started with round one. World Series of Fighting versus Bellator. World Series of Fighting Executive Vice President, also matchmaker for World Series of Fighting, Ali Abdul Aziz was a guest on the most recent MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani. Ali went on the MMA Hour with the intention of calling out Bellator for a crossover pay-per-view that will see World Series of Fighting fighters take on Bellator fighters, with the winning company taking the gate and the pay-per-view money. Ali proposed a 10-fight pay-per-view card with a list of Bellator and World Series of Fighting fighters he would like to see face off against each other on this crossover pay-per-view. The main event would be Tyrone Spong versus Quinton Jackson. That would be a super fight, of course, not count to the scores of who wins out of Bellator and World Series of Fighting. Now, I personally think, guys, that's mainly because Quinton Jackson would whoop Tyrone Spong's ass, so I think that's why that's being shoved as a super fight.
Okay.
Greg, what's your thoughts on the World Series of Fighting versus Bellator pay-per-view? Do you like the idea?
Before I address that one, I'll address the Spong Rampage
Oh,
thing.
yeah?
Not a chance in hell Rampage wins that.
No?
Forrest Griffin gave you the textbook on how to beat Rampage a wee while back. Leg kicks. Spong would break his leg.
He was using leg kicks in his last fight against Belfast.
Yeah.
I noticed that. He was using them a lot, Quinton.
But he never checks. He never checks him, so Spong would he'd knock him out in some way. Rampage is done in that way.
I am a bit of a nutugger of Tyrone Spong too. Actually looking forward to him transitioning to MMA actually. But I think Quinton, just off his wrestling now and his all-round game, would beat him and take him down, especially in the cage. But you are correct there. Tyrone Spong can, if he lands a few leg kicks and...
See, there's the other issue as well with ego. Rampage has got an ego. He would try and stand with him. There's just no way. The fight would be a disaster for Rampage. That's one reason it will not happen. Anyway, back on the topic for the event. The event itself, I think it'd be great. I think it'd be a huge success if they brought it on pay-per-view.
Have you had a look at the potential fight card?
Well, yeah, there's some fights that I'm not really too interested in. There's the ones where it's mainly the guys from Bellator. I'd like to see how they'd get on against proper competition. The likes of Minakov, I'd like to see how he would deal with Arlovsky.
Yeah.
I'd like to see how Attila Vey would deal with Anthony Johnson and Shlemenko with Okami. Those are the three that kind of interest me most anyway. The rest of them are all exciting fights. There is obviously other good fights on the card.
Yeah, the one that gets me a bit of an hard on here, Greg, is Douglas Lima versus Palares. I'm a big fan of Douglas Lima.
Again, it'd let you know how good he was if he was to beat Palares, and that's mainly the way I see it. And based upon that, you can clearly see that I'm kind of favouring that WSOF would win the majority of the fights because I think they've got the stronger fighters.
Well, it's strange that you mentioned that, Greg, because I'm looking at the fight card. I believe that World Series of Fighting have suggested this, so they can prove that they are the second best company and have the better fighters. But looking at the fights, it's a bit of a risk because I believe Rick Horn would beat John Fitch. It's the first one to win 5 fights, obviously, because it's going to be 9-fight fight card altogether on the World Series of Fighting versus Bellator, because Tyrone Spong versus Quinton Jackson will be a super fight. So it's first one to 5. So Rick Horn, I would believe, would beat John Fitch. That's 1-0. Brett Cooper versus Dave Branch, close, 50-50 fight. I believe Dave Branch might actually beat him. But Michael Chandler versus Justin Gaffjay.
Yeah.
I think Michael Chandler might beat him. That's a real close fight too. But Douglas Lima definitely beats Palares in my opinion. Shlemenko could easily beat Okami. So
you're naming some of them. The only 3 fighters. I only see Bellator winning 3 fights on that card. I disagree. I think Fitch would just easily dominate Horn. I think Chandler, Minakov, and Strauss would be the only guys to win on the card that they've got. I can't see Bellator winning any other fights than that.
Okay, let's get your thoughts on this here, Chris.
Oh, well, first of all, I want to say that, you know how everyone was upset that, you were saying that GSP, Ozzy and Anderson Silva fight, and everyone's upset that super fights in the UFC don't seem likely to happen. Well, we've got a super fight right here, World Series of Fighting versus Bellator. So that's my first thought. Second, well, I was a little bit surprised because, like you said, I think it's a very big risk for World Series of Fighting because while I agree with what Greg said that a lot of these fights, you looking at them on paper, you'd feel that the World Series of Fighting guys would win. This is MMA, so anything can happen. So I was a little bit surprised. But on the other hand, I think it's a great move from World Series of Fighting. One, because we've seen co-promotion before in the sport. Also, because World Series of Fighting they've only been around for just over a year. They haven't done any pay-per-view, and neither has Bellator. But the fans are behind them a lot more than they are behind Bellator. And like you said, they seem to have the high-level guys. So for them to make an entrance into the pay-per-view business, you've got to be smart about it. You've got to think, okay, well, we're not going to make UFC numbers, but we at least have the talent to possibly put on a few good pay-per-views here and there. So if they want to put this on to try and get that attention, then I think it's a brilliant move. So I wouldn't call it a bad move. I would just say a risky move. But in this kind of sport and in life in general, you've got to take risks. So overall, I think it's a good move.
I want to move back to Ali Aziz. Ali also mentioned on the MMA Era that Bellator tried taking something that wasn't theirs, apparently. He claimed that he didn't think Spike TV knew about it, which sort of tells me that Bellator tried taking World Series of Fighting's TV deal from under their noses. Greg, do you think that this is the real reason World Series of Fighting laid down the challenge, or do you think World Series of Fighting have been trying to, plot this for a while now and sort of overtake Bellator, and just using this sort of as an excuse, like, oh, you're trying to swipe our TV deals, so then we'll challenge you?
I don't think it's anything to do with it. I don't think he even realistically thinks this is ever going to happen. I think it's just the same reason Bellator did it to Strikeforce years ago. They challenged them to a head-to-head. It's the same thing. They're just trying to make a name for themselves. Nothing more. I don't think there's anything more to it than that. He's just trying to create a bit of hype, a bit of media talk, and that's the main reason this is all going ahead. Because realistically, this is never going to happen.
Well, I was going to ask you that next, Greg. What do you think the percentage is of this pay-per-view actually happening between World Series of Fighting and Bellator? Where would you rank it in percentage, Greg?
0. No chance. Absolutely 0% chance. You guys have been talking that it's a risk for World Series of Fighting. I'd say it's a huge risk for Bellator to accept it. They lose to World Series of Fighting, they'll lose everything they've got in name. They've lost the lot. They would need to win that and win it convincingly, or they would lose a lot of face. And there's no way in hell that Bellator accept this for that reason.
Chris, what percentage would you give this crossover pay-per-view of actually happening?
That's a good one. At this stage, I would probably give it about at this stage, I'd give it probably a 55% chance, so basically a 50-50 chance. I agree with you, Greg, it's a huge risk for Bellator, but Bellator does like to take risks. I mean, if you read Bjorn Redney's stories, how many times he got a mortgage on his house just so that he could successfully create Bellator. The man knows what it's like to take risks, and you say that it's a big promotional risk for him. He already took a big promotional risk when he thought it would be a good idea to have Tito Ortiz versus Quinton Rampage Jackson as the main event for their first pay-per-view. Absolutely, I mean, I would have watched the fight, admittedly, but to put that as your first pay-per-view event, it is a terrible idea. He made it, and granted, they made the correct decision to move it to free TV when Tito got injured. But what I'm saying is that he's he took a massive risk with that, and it would have just been the worst event the company would have ever had, probably. So, and he always makes I've often been very critical of Bellator's, of how Bellator does things, and what I say to people constantly is that they put on so many shows that each show is just sort of mediocre. It's not their best show. They have prospects headlining their cards that people have never heard about. So that in itself is a risk. So what I'm saying is that Bellator is used to taking risks, and I think Bjorn Redney will probably respond to this because, like I said, there is a high chance that his fighters could win, and he could win the whole thing. And imagine if Bellator does win, because if they do win, it's brilliant. They get their first pay-per-view event, which is, they already talked about doing a pay-per-view event for Michael Chandler versus Eddie Alvarez 3. So if they win this, then sweet. It's great for them. So I think this could probably happen, but it's such early days that I'm not willing to make a bet saying it will happen, won't happen, but I think there's a high chance that it could happen.
Yeah, but you mentioned Bjorn, he likes to take risks. But there's smart risks and there's dangerous ones. Now, right now, Bellator ranks number 2, personally for me, especially in the United States. World Series, they are a close second. I believe they are third, especially with them branching out now. I believe they should branch out first. They're going to all these different countries, making deals with other promotions like Canada, Brazil, Japan, they're in now. Apparently they're going to be doing 12 shows, 12 pay-per-views in 2014, which is a big step up. I believe they only did, 4 last year? I think it's about 4, so they've literally tripled their pay-per-views for this year, so that's a big step forward too. But Bellator have been going longer, they've established a brand, established a name. So I think all the risk is Bellator. But right now, World Series of Fighting, as I mentioned before, they're coming out all cocky and brash, putting this challenge down, laying the challenge down. And also, to me, the person who lays down the challenge, it could backfire big time because they're coming out all cocky and brash and confident, like, hey, we're going to whoop your guys' asses, let's go for it. And they're not going to steamroll over the Bellator fighters. I've read through the list of the proposed fight card, and to me, it's a pretty close fight card. Could they do some big numbers off it? Fuck yeah, that'd be a big pay-per-view. That'd be a massive pay-per-view. If it ends up close, like a 5-4, and say like Quinton beats Tyrone Spong in the final, or Tyrone Spong beats Quinton, and it levels the playing field to 5-5, then both sides are winners. So there's 3 ways of looking at this. You can either get your fucking ass whooped by Bellator, or you can get your ass whooped by World Series, or you can have a really close fight card where you both look like you got very talented fighters, put on one big show, and make shitloads of money. So to me, it needs a lot of consideration by the Bellator management. Obviously, I don't.
One other thing you've got to consider is that Bellator isn't owned by Bjorn Rebney anymore. They're
Exactly.
owned by Viacom, and Viacom wouldn't allow this to happen. It's hugely bad business for a company their size.
Okay, moving on to round 2. Tito Ortiz is arrested for DUI. Former UFC lightweight champion Tito Ortiz was taken into custody by highway patrol officers around 4 a.m. Monday morning, released roughly 4 hours later on a $15,000 bond. Tito had a blood alcohol level of 0.12. The legal limit in California is 0.8. Chris, what's your thoughts on Tito Ortiz getting arrested? Do you think this will affect his Bellator contract also?
No, I don't. Well, first of all, I must say it's sad, and I don't think this will affect his Bellator contract because Bellator at the moment just needs stars, and Tito, regardless of, he shouldn't be headlining a pay-per-view event at this stage, or for the rest of his career, he should not be headlining a pay-per-view event. Despite that, he does bring in attention, so I think Bellator will keep him because of that. But yeah, it's sad. I mean, originally I thought that the worst thing that could happen to Tito is that he could get allowed to fight again, or he could be fighting again. That's not because there's nothing against Tito's as a fighter, but he shouldn't be fighting again. I really want to see
Chris, you brought the vicious tongue to the show today, man.
Why? I just said that I don't know. I just said that he's a guy who should be retired, and I don't want to see him fight again. So for me, the biggest risk was his doctor saying, "Hey, you can fight again," because if he was to say that, then he would definitely fight again. But it turns out that there was something else on the agenda as far as worse things that could happen to Tito Ortiz. It's like, again, it's sad, and you've got to wonder where Tito is mentally, because there was talk of, Dana White brought it up when he was first asked about Tito's comeback. He said Tito needs money. Now, we didn't know that for sure. We know that he's been very unlucky with his relationship with Jenna Jameson. And now that, it sounds like he's still battling for the right to have his kids. And Jenna's just, we don't really know what she's doing. It's just, if Tito does need the money, and he's so depressed that he's doing this again, because he has done this before, let's not forget, back when he first had issues with Dana White. So, yeah, it does make you feel what's up with Tito, and it's sad, and again, if he really does need money, then he is going to get back into fighting, and like I've already said, I don't want to see that happen at all. So, it's sad, it's unfortunate. There's not much more to be said, really.
You mentioned Jenna Jameson there. There's been a lot of accusations that Tito's career began to decline as soon as he started dating her. I don't know how true that is, but I'm interested to see in his next fight, obviously with the injuries healed and not being with Jenna. If they don't stick Tito in against somebody like Quentin Jackson, somebody who's not a good wrestler, I'd like to see how Tito does and see if we can see glimpses of the old Tito Ortiz. Obviously, I don't think his body's like the old Tito Ortiz of 2000, 2002. But it'd be interesting to see how he does. Greg, what's your take on Tito Ortiz getting busted for DUI?
None really. I don't really care. He's not relevant in MMA at all anymore. Nothing. You asked if it will affect his Bellator contract. He'll probably get paid more because it's got them in the media again. They've never done nothing to John Copenhaver, the old war machine, and he gets away with all kinds of shit. So his contract with Bellator's cast iron. It's hard to bother about it. The only thing that really comes to mind is where would this leave him for custody with his kids. I've seen Jenna Jameson making comments on Twitter and stuff saying that she's now going to go after him again because she's got something against him. So
it's ridiculous.
The custody battle's already to start again now because of this, and it's a stupid ass thing he's done, and he'll regret it if that's what it comes to. He loses his kids.
Well, I don't want to get into family business on this show, but that's a low blow, to be honest with you. Who hasn't? I know it's a stupid thing, but who hasn't just had an extra glass of wine or an extra pint and got in your car? He's been under the microscope. He's been so clean and so well behaved for so long that it's just a shame to see that one fuck up in the public eye can really screw you over. He just never seems to have any luck nowadays, Tito. He's had the injuries. He's had the shit with Dana.
He brings it all on himself, though. To be fair, he brings it all on himself.
Okay, let's move on to round 3. Dominick Cruz is stripped of his bantamweight title. Now, I'm getting conflicting reports on this, guys. There's some media outlets claiming that Cruz vacated his title, and some claim he was stripped of the belt. But either way, to me, Zuffa, there was more than likely behind the decision. Whether they said, look, you come out and vacate it, or we're just going to fucking take it anyway. Former interim champion Renan Barao is now the undisputed bantamweight champion of the UFC. Greg, what's your thoughts on Cruz stepping down as champion?
I think he will have vacated the title myself. I think he would have done the honourable thing and realised that he had to do it eventually. And hopefully that is what happened, and he wasn't stripped. Although, if he didn't vacate it, he should have been stripped, because it's more than 2 years since he fought. Do you think it's the right move, though, Greg, to let the division move forward? Obviously, exactly. That's the whole point. If he wasn't willing to vacate, they had to strip him to let the division move on now. it needed to move on. You couldn't constantly have this thing where you've got a champion who was only the champion because the other guy's not there, which probably still is the case, but at least he's now the champion, not the interim champion, and it's given the whole division a new kind of focus and a new aim.
Well, to me, he was actually beginning to put a stamp on the belt, to be honest with you. I was actually looking at him, I was viewing him in a way as the real champion, to be honest with you. I wasn't actually viewing Cruz as the champion anymore. I don't know why that was. I don't know if it's because Cruz has been out such a long time that I started viewing Barao, or it's maybe due to Barao's performances, because he's looked really fucking impressive as champion. You know, winning the belt and then defending it, he's looked really, really good. So maybe that's what it is. He's put a stamp as being champion now and sort of bumped Cruz from his position. Chris, what's your thoughts on Cruz stepping down as champion?
Well, I think the UFC did the right move. Now, as far as did Cruz vacate or did he get stripped, I'm not sure. I'd like to think what Greg said, that he did the honourable thing and understood that he had to be stripped, that he had to step down as champion. There's a chance that he didn't, but the UFC, they made it clear that he had to come back by February, which he said he could do, or they're going to strip him, or he has to vacate the belt, and he couldn't, regardless of, another different injury, whatever, he couldn't come back by then. So he had to give up the belt, and they gave it to Barao. Fair enough. I mean, Cruz was really just, not only has it been so long since he fought, but it's, this isn't a knock on him. These injuries were not his fault, but unfortunately they just happen in the sport. But it was hard to consider Dominick Cruz as champion, because this is a guy his last fight was on Versus, which doesn't exist anymore for the UFC. It was in 2011. We're now in 2014, and his last fight was against Demetrius Johnson, who's now the flyweight champion. So when you look at all of that and you consider what Barao has done, it's hard to consider. It was hard to consider Cruz as champion. The only way he could consider himself champion is if he came back and fought Barao. Now I hope the UFC does make that fight somewhere down the line if Cruz decides to come back, because now you've got to wonder, look, is 3 years really, if he comes back and he hasn't fought for 3 years, is it realistic for him to think that he can be champion again? So overall, I think the UFC did make the right call. It's not the decisive, clean way of having a challenger take a belt from a champion, but considering that that Cruz has been out for so long and Barao had already defended the belt quite a few times, it was the best call in my opinion.
Renan Barao will make his first undisputed title defence at UFC 169 against the guy he won the interim title against, the California kid, Urijah Faber. Faber takes on Barao with only 3 weeks to prepare. Is this a good move or a bad move by Urijah Faber, Greg?
It's a tough one. It's hard to say it's a bad move for him, because he's getting a shot at the title again. But realistically, it is a bad move to go 3 weeks notice on a guy who completely dominated him the last time they fought. The last time they fought, Barao only had 6 weeks notice to fight Faber. So maybe there's kind of similarities in the short notice of the fight as well, but it's a tough one. Faber's obviously looked great recently, and he's not long fought, so he'll still be in good shape, I would imagine. But
yeah, because regardless, Faber is ranked number one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Division, so he's number one contender regardless whether he takes this fight on 3 weeks' notice or fucking 3 months' notice. Yeah, so the risk is there, but then again, he might be in good shape. He might be thinking, do you know what? I'm in good shape. I'm on a roll at the minute, so I'm just going to get in there.
Yeah, and I admire his attitude. Like, Faber would never back down. You knew if he got offered the fight, he was going to take it. It's just a shame they couldn't have moved it back to the next event, say a month later, because they've got a title fight on this card anyway. So they could have took the fight off the card completely, put it back a month, and gave Faber an extra few weeks to prepare for it. But it is what it is.
That's a very good point. Chris, do you think Faber should have waited a little longer than 3 weeks to face Barao?
Well, ideally, yes. But overall, I think the UFC made the right call, because there was Rafael Asuncao, hope I said that right, but he's fighting on UFC 170, so he's peaked to fight at a different time. Brad Pickett is out there, but he has lost. He's coming off a loss to Michael McDonald, who got destroyed by Barao, and he's also lost to Barao before. So really, the main question was who else is out there, and I mean, there's your top 5 guys. Eddie Wineland and Michael McDonald have both lost their title shots to Barao, so I think, and Faber did lose his fight to Barao, but he's the only guy in a UFC title fight to last the distance with him. So overall, I think they made the right call. Now, I can see why the UFC did this, because they could have pushed it back a couple of weeks or whatever, made it later so that Faber had more time to prepare. The thing is that Barao he's already prepped and ready to go, so that's one reason. The other reason is that I think they're looking to have a big 2014. They want to have a big year every year, but 2013 was big. They want to make 2014 bigger. Therefore, they need a bigger Super Bowl weekend than they've had in the past. And this was lined up to be just that, because having 2 title fights, the return of Cruz against Barao, champion versus champion, as well as Jose Aldo, who's starting to work his way up as far as pay-per-view draws go, it made sense. So they were going to keep both fights on the card, in my opinion. And putting Urijah Faber there, I think it was the second best fight, because Urijah Faber is the biggest star below 170. And Barao, so having that champion versus champion match between Barao and Cruz was big. Now that Cruz is injured, putting Faber in there, who's the biggest star below 170, against Barao, who he's fought before, and Barao he's fought on pay-per-view since he's been defending the belt, and he's done really well. So I think it's the second biggest fight, or possible. This could be bigger than Cruz, I don't know, but this is definitely at least the second biggest fight you could make in that division. So, and considering it's Super Bowl weekend, I can understand why they did it.
Now, I want to switch back to Dominick Cruz for a second, guys. UFC have removed Dominick Cruz from the UFC rankings. I'm sure that this is temporary until they figure out where to place him. Greg, where would you place Dominick Cruz upon his return to action in the bantamweight rankings?
Depends if he wins or loses. we do rankings ourselves on MMA Crypt site, and I've not ranked Cruz at all for a year, because I think if you've not fought for a year, you don't deserve to be ranked. You need to be fighting to be ranked. So
True.
I've no issue with him being removed from the rankings. I think it should happen with more people. I think the only reason he was probably still in the rankings was because he was the champion. So he was kind of given a ranking falsely just by the fact that he was a champion.
Chris, where would you place Dominick Cruz in the bantamweight division when he returns?
Good question. At the moment, I would rank him. Well, in the pound for pound rankings, I wouldn't rank him at all, because everything that all the argument he has to be in the pound for pound rankings, that was back in 2011. Like I said, we're in 2014 now, so I wouldn't rank him. I just wouldn't rank him at all. And as far as I wouldn't rank him in the pound for pound rankings at all. As far as the bantamweight rankings go, I wouldn't mind ranking him in the top, possibly in the top 10. At number 10, or since UFC does top 15, I would rank him in the top 15, just because the general idea out there is that whenever he does come back, he's going to give anybody a tough fight. So that's for sure. So I wouldn't mind ranking him somewhere in the top 15, as long as it's below the top 5, because the top 5 is the guys who you feel they can be champions, they're championship caliber fighters, and it's not a knock on Dominick Cruz, but because we haven't seen him so long, we just don't know that for sure. We don't know that for sure just yet. So those are my thoughts on where I would put him in the rankings. And again, like I agree completely with Greg. It really depends how he looks in his comeback fight, which just keeps on getting extended time and time again. So as Vitor Belfort would say, only God knows when he's going to come back.
Well, it's the same thing as the title situation, really. It's like he's vacated the title or was stripped of the title because, not to hold up the division any longer. And it's the same thing with the rankings. If you're ranked number 1 for 2 years and you haven't fought, that's taking opportunities away from other people, And people want to battle for this number 1 and number 2 spot. And you got some guys sitting there who's not earning that spot. It's the same thing we mentioned with Tito too. He went off past glories a lot. You can't go off past glories. You got to go off like your last 5 fights, I would say. For me, it'll be the last 5 fights. A lot of fighters say, "Oh, I go off my last fight." I would say go off your last 5 fights, because in this day and age of MMA, you can win and lose fairly easy. There's so many good fighters out there. So I would judge off your last 5 fights. If you've won 3 out of your last 5 fights, that's pretty good. Especially if you're fighting top 10, top 15 guys, that's pretty impressive. You're winning 4 of those, you're a contender. You're winning 5, then you're probably a champion, or at least fighting for the title. So that's the way I look at it. And I believe Cruz, when he does come back, I'm glad to see him removed. I do believe he should be removed. But it's a strange one for when he does come back, because it's like he was the champion when he got injured. It's unfortunate. He didn't lose his ranking off merit. It was down to an unfortunate injury, and not block up the rankings and the division. So when he does come back, I do agree he's got to sort of earn his right back up. But I do believe off his past achievements and going off the last 5 fights sort of thing, that he should be ranked pretty high. Because you can't rank TJ Dillashaw above him. Even Michael McDonald, I wouldn't rank Michael McDonald above him. Michael McDonald's ranked at number 2 currently. And then you start talking about top 10, top 15, you're replacing nearly 15. It's like Menjivar, Caraway, and Scott Jorgensen. Eric Prez too. Eric Prez is another good young up-and-coming fighter who trains with Greg Jackson. I like him too, but no way would I place him above Dominick Cruz. Francisco Rivera, another good fighter, another good stand-up fighter. No way would he be above Dominick Cruz, in my opinion. So I don't really have an answer, to be honest, guys. I would understand if he got placed number 10 or number 15 because he's been off for so long, but it wouldn't seem right to me. I would bring him back, but it's like, that's the point for the other argument too. It wouldn't seem right if he come back and just slotted straight into number 2. It's not fair on the guys who've been fighting for the past 2 years. Do you know what I mean? Like Eddie Wineland and whatnot. But Eddie Wineland did get his shot, to be fair. So
it depends who he fights.
What about number 5? I think 5 might be fair if he come back. Place him at number 5.
I don't think he gets a rank until he wins, though, and it depends who he beats. It depends.
So so you're saying you want to wipe him out the top 15?
Yeah, he's no ranking. Yeah, no ranking at all till he fights. At least that's the way I see it. I don't see why you would give him a ranking. How can you rank a guy who hasn't fought for nearly 3 years by the time he fights? It's just impossible.
I would disagree slightly, just slightly, because he hasn't fought in a long time, but he's still. When he did fight, he was. Okay, besides Urijah Faber, he was dominating guys from start to finish. So, that does have some merit. Now, it's not enough merit to make you to put you as the second best guy in the division. And I definitely agree with that. So, I would give him some rankings. It would not be in it would not be in the top 5. It would, if it was to be in the number, it would either be number 10 in the top 10, or it would be somewhere in the top 15. Just because, again, what he did before. It does hold some merit and does hold some argument that he does deserve to be there. Now, they're in the top 15 involves Hector Lombard, who's fought once at welterweight, and it also like heavyweight. It involves Jimmy Manuwa, who's the top 15 rankings I'm talking about. It involves Jimmy Manuwa, who's only fought once, who he hasn't fought any top 10 guy, any highly ranked guys at light heavyweight. So I don't care about him being ranked in the top 15. Last thing I'll say on this is that it seems that I think this injury was a blessing in disguise for him, which sounds hilarious because he's been out for so long and now he's no longer the champion. But let's just say he went in there and got walloped by Renan Barao like everyone else, then everyone would say, then he'd get so much criticism, and everyone would say, and all of us people who know the sport would say, well, he's been out for over 2 years. Can you blame the guy? And then he'd go to the bottom of the pack, now that he's been stripped of the belt, or now that he's no longer champion, when he comes back, he fights someone lower ranked, and it's way more realistic for someone to come back after being out for over 2 years, fight someone who's lower ranked, work your way back up, rather than come back and fight someone who's been destroying guys and get absolutely walloped. So I think it was a blessing in disguise for him. And the UFC, like I said, as far as pay-per-view money goes for Super Bowl weekend, it's got the next best fight in there. So,
okay, sadly that is all for today's show. As always, thank you for watching. From MMA Crypt Fighting Talk, take care and goodbye.